well, we live in an age where cars like this don't exist anymore. BMW are not going to make anything like this. And I think these are the two best Skunkworks BMWs that they've made. I don't think they made any other Skunkworks BMWs.
I think these are a product of BMW engineers out of hours putting cars together that haven't really been commissioned by BMW, so they're experimenting with parts. I mean, this thing, when they built this, there is obviously a Z3 coupe, but the lines and everything, they based it off the convertible and they've fabricated it together. So it's
Did they make the coupe after they made this?
Well, they made the Z3 in the convertible state from 1996, 97.
Yeah.
But if you look at the panels here, this is a piece of plastic because they fabricated a roof and then they didn't think about it.
Both these cars in standard form are very, to me anyway, unappealing.
You mean the standard 1 Series and the standard Z3?
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing special in my eyes about them.
They weren't cars I yearned for at all.
But do you think by targeting cars that are so unappealing in their range, that they've made them uber appealing? Because these now are commanding such a premium. People who see them, like you were saying when you were driving here, someone stopped you at Pret and like gave you thumbs up, and like people who know what that is, know what it is.
What they've done is there's only 450 of these in the UK, so it's remarkable that they are still selling at the same price they were retailing for in 2011. They did drop to sort of low 30s, some late 20s,
and then just
back in 2014.
Because the limited numbers.
Put it this way, 2013 I paid 35 for mine, and a year later I sold it for the same money. That same car with the same mileage, which had, I think it was about 12,000 miles, would be 50, 60, 70. And then, this higher mileage version is, 40k or so. But they retail for about that, 40 to 45, depending on, how lucky you were.
I feel like Gallup's being very quiet here.
So look, I don't like the base cars, don't like the 1 Series coupe. I think it looks like someone crashed into the back of it.
Okay.
Exactly what I said. It's so ungainly, right?
Yeah. And then the Z3 coupe kind of looks like someone stepped on the middle, and it feels like, I know it doesn't actually go.
Rags getting super offended.
And I don't find it very pretty. Also, they don't have the Hofmeister kink on the C pillar, which does bother me.
Oh, right, okay.
It does bother me, and it makes it look makes it look like it's got a hard top on it. Well, the M treatment is obviously incredible.
Yeah.
This is really, really nice M treatment. I love this in particular.
Yeah.
I love how wide the arches are.
Yeah.
And the 1M was the genesis for one of their design language. I've got F8010-4. The design language on that car debuted on this. They had the air curtain on the front bumper, and this general kind of motif with this like strake instead of the vent and all that kind of stuff. It's a really cool thing.
But it's really the rear that bothers you.
It's the whole proportions.
The whole proportions bother you.
I really like long, low cars. That's the opposite. This is a short, stubby car. It's like a pug. And I think what bothers me about that is that the whole point of a coupe is that it should look really good. And a coupe, the definition of a coupe, to me this is a two-door saloon. The definition of a coupe is that it should have a lower roofline and the whole thing should be like slung back, which is how you can call a four-door car like a CLS or an M6 Grand Coupe, a coupe, it's got that roofline. Yeah. This hasn't got it. This is a hatchback where they've cut the boot off, basically.
This gets more attention than this because this looks like a 1 Series to the untrained eye.
But even
that is a visually wild looking car.
Yeah, but even in burnt orange, I don't think this gets as much attention.
Yeah, Valencia Orange. I remember that car used to get because of the colour.
It's one of those, part of it's the colour. I think it's also this kind of low slung, kind of that whole 60s thing around with a massive front end and a short back.
Yeah. I think that's much more Marmite than this because this is just, other than Gallup who really doesn't like it, most people will be quite ambivalent about it. With this, it divides people.
Yeah.
Some people think it's the most ugly BMW they've ever seen. Others think it's an absolute work of art.
Yeah.
You know what it is with these? Is that you don't need to have an opinion on them, whether or not you think it's pretty or not. The proportions are so dramatic that it's an instant classic.
So they made the Roadster and then they made the coupes?
Yeah, I believe so, but I believe they sort of fabricated the roof and, it wasn't something that they were going to make. I mean, there's only 821 of these in the UK, S50, and I don't know the numbers.
The S54s are, so if we were to think, so we would say, would we all right in saying S54 best BMW engine made?
They've made a lot of good ones. That's what makes it hard. If any other manufacturer made the S54, it'd be the best engine they've made.
Yeah.
But with BMW, you've got 85, 65.
Yeah.
So the best 6-cylinder BMW engine in the M range.
Yeah. Where did the S50 engine originate? Because my
E36 M3 Evo
was the first one to have it.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
And so USA didn't get that because America got these cars, right?
They did. I think they came with the S52.
The fact that this was a unappealing model that they did the Skunkworks thing on it. Do you think that maybe other M models start like that as well? Because there's a bunch of cars that they've made, never released. I think there was an article on Top Gear not that long ago. Sort of 7 or 8 models. So for example, they made an S62 engined M3 CSL.
Yeah.
Still great.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
M3 Touring, there's one of one.
There's one.
But there's an M8. There's an M8 as well. Oh yeah, M8.
E60, M60.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So some of them, they do a bunch of them, and some of them get taken to production, some of them don't. Obviously.
You're right. Some of them get through. These are the ones that got through, basically.
So why did these get through?
I think
because these are a lot cheaper to build than all the ones you've mentioned. Also, this era. So the Z3 is an interesting car because it's similar to the Mercedes SLK of the era. When the Z3 first came out, when it was new, it was going for overs, and so was the SLK, and so was the Boxster, and there was a bubble market around these roadsters. Everyone was super excited in the mid to late 90s that all of these new roadsters are coming out. These German manufacturers making them, like Porsche making a full sports car, BMW's making a sports car, Mercedes making a sports car, and people going crazy over them. And the Boxster won. The Boxster was one that came on top by a long, long way. People were really disappointed by these and really disappointed by this SLK. And I think that's why the Z3M, with its crazy, crazy arches, which must have been so expensive to produce, I think that's why BMW did it, because they wanted to compete with the Boxster, and they had seen their Z3 as being not a flop, but not quite what they wanted.
The reason why it came to prominence and people started to look at it was, I think, because of GoldenEye. Because you remember the Z3 and GoldenEye?
I don't know. It was such a small feature.
No, but my point is that because they've gone from Aston Martin to the first Pierce Brosnan James Bond, because he drove a DB5, to a Z3, and I remember seeing it as a kid, being bitterly disappointed by the car. And I remember the first time I thought a Z3 looked amazing was, I don't know, it's a very niche scene, but do you remember the film Armageddon? They have a black Z3M Roadster in it, and I remember clocking that car because we watched it at the cinema, and I remember seeing the Z3M coupe being like, wow, over Liv Tyler. I was like, that is a cool car. And then when they made the coupe, you were talking about Marmite people. I loved it. My sister and brother, we're all car enthusiasts in our family, hated it. I mean, the interior, I mean, you've ruined it with the seats that you've put inside of it.
Upgraded the seats.
No, you haven't. You've absolutely destroyed the seats, because the seats were beautiful. But the thing that I love about this particular car is that if you look inside, the center stack is just, it feels very special. We've got 3 dials. What is it? Oil temperature, water temperature, and time. And it just looks really,
and it's even got a dog net.
Yeah.
It has got a dog net,
You know why else Rags has ruined this car, in my opinion?
Okay.
So not only has he ruined the seats, the wheel colour is wrong. So the S50 engine, so the original Z3M coupes, they came with silver wheels. The S54 came with an anthracite colour.
I never knew that.
Shadow chrome.
Shadow chrome, sorry. I also think these are some of the best designed alloy wheels
such good wheels
BMW have ever made. So these didn't come with traction control.
No,
and a
the
lot
S50s
of these
didn't. S54s did.
Fine. A lot of these spun out. A lot of them were destroyed.
Well, underneath, right, this is the funny thing.
It's an E30.
This is an E30 M3. This is basically, you know, people do the S50, S54 M3 conversions. This is basically that from factory.
Really?
So you've got an E30 rear end with a trailing arm suspension. And what happens is when you go into a corner and you load it up, right, the rear suspension gets loaded up and it gains camber, it gains negative camber, and you get a bit of grip. If you then lift off, it unloads suspension and the camber changes, and you're screwed, and you've got a super short wheelbase, super wide, like the track width to wheelbase ratio is all messed up. I say messed up, it's hairy.
Yeah.
And you're off.
Would that happen in an E36 M3?
No, because the E36 M3 has the pioneering Z-Link rear suspension. Yeah.
So why did they not use that for
space and packaging and
cost? Okay.
Because you've got to remember, this was, even though this has the engine from an E36 M3, it's still the size of a Z3, right?
I've obviously been wrongly assuming that the base platform for this was an E36.
It is. So it's an E36.
But it's classified as an
E36 compact.
Yeah.
So E36. Everything in front of there is E36, and then it's got the rear subframe designed from an E30, which also came as a compact.
So these are sitting at what, 20 to 30,000 pounds in the UK. In America, I think they're sitting a bit higher.
They are.
Because they're more revered in America. But the S54s,
they start from 35 for like the highest moon miles to 60, 70.
Wow.
Yeah, they're very, very
expensive. Miles, and I mean the spec.
Are they rarer?
Very rare.
It's
Very
like
very
latest
rare.
Couldn't tell you numbers.
So there's quite a lovely story with this car because you used to daily this car, right?
I used to daily it
When did you
2006 to 2008.
But then he sold it.
Oh.
Yeah, I sold it.
No way.
I owned it twice, yeah.
Yeah. So he sold this car in what, 2008, right?
So in 2008 to buy a CSL.
Very good
Fair
upgrade.
enough.
Very good upgrade.
Yeah.
You got in touch in 2015 with me because this came back up for sale.
Yeah.
And it just had some.
It needed some work, let's just
needed
say.
some work.
Paint, it needed wheels refurbed, it needed a bit of mechanical
How many people
work.
owned it in between? Do you know?
Quite a few actually. So
Okay.
it's had a few owners,
Right.
but they've always been on the forum. So I've always kind of kept an eye on it, and
Yeah.
every time it came up for
'Cause
sale, I was sort of flirted with the
number
idea of
plate
buying
is
it.
T313 JCF, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. It's so nice to see that you own it because this is, out of all your cars, probably one of the ones you won't sell.
Yeah, it's one of the ones I won't sell. I hardly use it, but it's, as I say to my wife, like, it's just part of the family. It means a lot to me. It's probably the worst driving car I have because they don't drive very well, as you explained with the E30 sort of rear suspension. But it's got that soul, that sort of uniqueness, and every time I drive it, I sort of feel all the kind of foibles that it has, but I love it.
I think it's phenomenal to drive. I can't remember the statistics because I know that this one's had some upgrades.
Yeah, so I think this is running over sort of 450
horsepower versus
wow.
how much stock?
I'm not sure exactly.
It must
what
have
is.
been-
They're
340
or 350.
Yeah.
They were very lightly fettled.
So it's an N50.
55,
Is it
okay.
N55?
N54.
N54. So
Twin
it's a
turbo.
twin.
And then they haven't had a lot done to them.
We were talking about how special that Z3M coupe was and how much of, it divides opinion. I feel like with this particular Skunkworks BMW, they almost went 90%, but they didn't go the full 100. And the full 100 would have been putting.
Well, the 400 would have been
V8.
carbon roof, better seats, such as BMW Performance seats.
I think one thing, the V8 engine.
Yeah, the V8, well,
Well, I think
Again,
we
Imran,
at that point.
you sold
Because
that
I
one.
think the whole point of this was that they had the 135i coupe,
Yeah.
which was a very cool but very flawed car. Because you've got a shed load of power, similar to this actually.
Yeah.
You've got a shed load of power and a chassis that has no idea what to do with it. They thought to themselves, okay, we've got the power, let's see how far we can take this chassis.
Yeah.
And similar to this is a very, very, and I mean it's the best possible way, it's a very, very cool partsman special. And if you're going to have a partsman special, you couldn't do better than have an M partsman special. So
Yeah.
underneath, this is all E90 M3. You've
Correct.
got E90 M3 subframes, front and rear,
Yeah.
E90 M3. I don't think the gearbox is E90 but you've got the
But
diff.
the gearbox in this, you must have felt this. A few episodes ago, we were talking about the BMW M
Yeah.
gearbox
Yeah,
being
that's
just
not that great.
This is great.
Yeah, this is where you love Manuel's
This,
car.
Yeah.
this is the same gearbox as in the M4.
Oh.
That's why I love the M4.
Right,
Yeah.
really?
Okay.
Okay, I didn't know
With
that.
a few tweaks, but yeah, it's the same. And it's a-
F82 M4.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
manual M4 has the same gearbox as this, but with
Yeah.
a few tweaks. Basically, like this was a partsman special. It was kind of a Skunkworks thing. They literally made it in their free time, like in
Yeah.
the shed, whatever. And they were like, okay, that's actually pretty good. And I think that's what it was. And the second you start putting carbon roof in and seats and V8 engine,
Would have really added cost.
it's a different thing at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And they probably wouldn't have signed it off.
Where was this sold?
Everywhere. This isn't actually that rare because you have 450 in the UK,
Yeah, one of 450 in the UK.
but then you have in the
Very
USA.
popular in Europe, US.
You do
Was
see
that-
them. You
Can
do.
I just understand, was that they deliberately decided to only sell 450 in the UK, or that's
Yeah,
just
of
how
course,
many they sold?
It's got a plaque. So
It's got a
I'd
plaque.
imagine
Fine.
Yeah,
it's
it was
fine.
limited in the way that the CSL was limited.
Yeah.
And that perhaps keeps the value very flat and obviously appreciating. This is going to be very similar to what I say about this and the Z4M. They're probably better put together cars because they've had a bit of time to, and the MT was a much more high volume production car.
Yes, yeah.
So I think objectively, Z4M drives better than this. The is it the F87 M2?
F87, yeah.
Probably drives better than that, back to back, maybe around a track, but they both lack soul. These two don't.
So the one thing I do think BMW missed, they did so, like you said, parts bin special. They did so many amazing things with this
Yeah.
car. The thing they really missed was the interior.
Yeah.
I think the interior is just so standard. It doesn't feel super
There's a
special.
little bit of Alcantara, but that's it, and
but-
that's
but
not
it
very
basically
exciting.
feels like a 1 Series when you get in. But BMW M Performance seats, that's the favourite mod from people.
So they're the ones that do
Plug and
have
play.
the holes in it, so you can put the
Yeah,
harnesses.
But they're recliners, aren't they? So
They're
you-
recliners, so you shouldn't really put harnesses.
This car's too rigid for the UK.
Yeah.
Oh,
Way
okay.
too rigid for the UK, in my opinion. But yeah, but equally, when I drove your CSL, I felt your CSL was too rigid for the UK as well.
There is adjustability in this because obviously it's running the nitrons, and I haven't had the time to work out exactly what.
Yeah, because at the moment I think it is on its hardest setting,
on a hard setting,
which
You obviously like doing stuff to your cars to modify them to a certain extent, but if we were to take out the box product, right? So this, if it didn't have a nitron, it didn't have any exhaust upgrades or anything. How did that come?
I think from that perspective, it would be obviously much, because I remember my Valencia Orange one that I had in 2013 was pretty much standard other than the exhaust and a remat, but
so it wasn't standard.
No, but I bought it that way. But from a suspension perspective, it was completely standard. And it was a lovely ride. I mean, I dailied that as well for a year. So I think, yeah, you definitely feel that this is much more rigid.
But this exhaust that you've got on it as well it's kind of wonderful but horrendous at the same time.
It's
so if you're
RPM.
at 100 miles an hour cruising, it's absolutely fine.
In Germany.
And then
in Germany.
If you're at 100 mile an hour cruise, it's absolutely fine. If you go down to 90, it's awful. If you go to 105, it's awful
it's
again.
That sweet spot.
There's little
3.5 revs.
resonance.
3,500 revs. It's that kind of boomy. No matter what people say, every aftermarket exhaust has somewhere in the range it will drone. And if you're sitting on the motorway with that drone,
it just sounds in second gear when you give it a hard,
fantastic.
when you give it a
with
hard
the
pull,
turbos as well.
Yeah.
When people were following Alessandro, he was leading the pack. People were saying that car was just, I think, probably one of the quickest cars on the trip because it was so well planted around corners that people were struggling to keep up with the lead. And he wasn't even gunning it.
Because what does this weigh? Probably 13 to 1400 kilos?
No, not that much, no.
They're not far off an E90. Yeah, genuinely.
But E90 is quite heavy, isn't it?
No, well, yeah, E92 is like 1600, but 1630. But basically, this era of BMW was nuts, right? So to give it a level playing ground, you could get a 3-litre natural aspirated engine, N52, across the entire range of BMW, right? You could get it in the 1 Series, the 3 Series, the 6 Series, just talking about coupes, and that was it. The 6 Series is the lightest implementation of that 3-litre engine out of all of them.
Really?
Being the more expensive car, it had more lightweighting in it. This is all steel. There's no, as far as I understand, maybe this is aluminium, I'm not sure, but there's no lightweighting in this car. The E92 has carbon roof. I'm pretty sure it's got a plastic boot, it's got plastic wings, aluminium bonnet.
Plastic wings, yeah.
And it's not that much bigger. It's the same width. It's just a bit longer. It's got 8 inches or 9 inches longer than the wheelbase. So this is a common myth with these small BMWs, the 1 Series, the 2 Series. They're not that much lighter. Because it's the wheelbase that you notice.
Because they weren't the luxury model, they didn't invest into the lightweight exterior metals, basically.
The base 1 Series is a very affordable car compared to the 3.
Here's a question, right? So these two are probably the most iconic Skunkworks BMWs. And when we say Skunkworks BMW, we're talking about after hours, cars that are low production volume.
Ones that shouldn't have been made.
Ones that shouldn't have been made. So if we were to list them, you have Z4M?
No.
No?
I think that was
No.
Is there any other Skunkworks BMW? Z1?
No, the Z1 was just, they never even made an M of that. The Z1 was just made. I think it was started off as a design study that eventually went into production, but it's not a Skunkworks car.
Was that a Skunkworks or was that a...
That was a celebration. They made that because of an anniversary. I just can't remember which one.
Talking about trickiness, that is a very tricky car to push.
Yes.
Very tricky car to push.
That's because that actually has quite flawed suspension.
This is not...
Did
you find this very tricky to drive?
No, not tricky to drive. The only thing with this is, obviously because of the upgrades, extremely rigid, so you could feel some liveliness from the rear of it. I never tried a standard one, so I don't know.
I mean,
whether maybe a standard one would have been more lively at the rear end.
Probably this has got more power.
It's got more power, so
it's like a hard
I think
balance.
if it's stiff, it will let it go quick. But I was chatting to Sid North about this last night. We were talking about one end, and basically his take is that it's a short wheelbase car with a boosty engine. So it's gonna, when it happens, you've got to be quick with it.
Was this the first boosted M car, actually?
That's the other debate. Is it an M car? Because I get people...
It is an M car.
Is it full
An M car is not about the engine.
An
M car is about the diff and a big rear subframe and just the way it's set up. Like,
it's really sad because they couldn't call it the M1.
They couldn't call it the M1.
Because there'd be so many haters. But actually, I think it would have been a really nice, personally, and I'm probably going to get hate for it, I thought it would have been a really nice, like, statement piece if they did call it the M1.
Yeah.
Personally, I think
actually the bigger mistake is the fact that they called the M1 the M1. They should have come up with something more interesting.
Something else, exactly.
True, but I think at that point it was the first M BMW collaboration, right? So because BMW M rescued BMW with their project.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it was a way to honour M MG.
I mean, it made
MBH.
sense at the time.
Mark my words though, people will comment saying, is it really an M car?
100%.
I've got big thoughts on this. An M car is about one thing, the connection, which actually probably falls down for the SUVs and stuff. But it's about the connection with the right foot and the rear axle. An M car, a proper M car should give you the confidence, maybe undeservedly, to be able to paint a black line down whatever white line you want on the road. And I feel like you can probably do that at least.
You would paint a black line, I would paint a brown line.
Whether the line wouldn't be perfectly arched, it'd be like...
But whether or not you ever do it as a driver, it doesn't matter. They have that feeling to them of that connection with a throttle
but I
to the rear
think
axle.
people debate because of the turbo lump. There's Alessandro question, like, is it the first turbo lumped M car?
But you had O2 turbo, which was pre-M branding.
Yeah.
And then
So not an M car.
And then it wasn't an M car, but the 745 E23 7 Series had a heavily boosted straight.
But that wasn't an M car.
It was in the same way that the A50 CSI could have been an M8.
Yeah.
That could have been the M7, but they've made
Because I don't really remember.
But it wasn't.
The reason why this particular model is very special to me is because this was the first car that we took on the Drive Collective trip. So what started Drive Collective. This
in the Valencia Orange?
Valencia Orange, a Scirocco, and an Audi R8. So those three cars always, to me, are very special because they started off something. And I think also this car started off we're very lucky to have the M2s, M2 CS, M2 Comp, and that whole lineage of car.
Yeah, this is the Genesis.
This is
the Genesis modern M. That's where it all started. You've got the design language at the front, you've got the turbocharged engine, you've got all these kind of design cues, and they kind of put it out there and thought, is this going to work? And then it did, and people loved it.
Yeah.
And that kind of gave them the carte blanche thing.
I also recall in period that this was it was almost seen as a E30 successor because of it being a small car. I know it's still a bit tall and so forth, but because it was finally a short wheel-based car, it was almost like they'd managed to get back to that size.
Yeah.
Because
people liked it.
They loved it. So, we talk about M cars in period, generally people disliking them. If we thought about the few ones that people did like were E39 M5, E34 M5. I think those are the only two M cars that people in period said, these are great cars.
The 34 was actually slated in period.
Sorry.
And the E28 M5 also was loved in period.
Oh, okay.
It was more the E28, because the E34 was, a lot of people benchmarked it, the benchmark 3.6 actually be slower than the E28.
Okay, fine, sorry. E28 M5, E39 M5?
E39 M5 was well rated in period, yeah. Loved
this was loved in period.
It was.
This was loved, and I think that's what's helped the residual values of it as well.
Yeah.
Because it's got such a cult following, it's got folklore about it. If you know what you're looking for, these are phenomenal cars.
Yeah.
And
it's quite strange actually though, because quite often it's the unloved stuff that
really
gets well regarded now.
That's why,
That's slightly different.
That's the case with that, because people didn't like it enough to buy them.
So they're so
now they're super rare, and they're super special.
They're still super rare, super special, but people don't. They're hard to sell.
These are completely Marmite cars, right?
Yeah.
So you hate them.
I don't know. I don't hate these.
Okay.
I do think they're quite ugly, but I think they're cool. I think these are just ugly.
Okay.
But I'd love to drive one.
But I think most people will agree that this straight line speed is great. Handling's not so good. It's not that refined. This thing is beautiful to drive.
Because I remember we once went out on a drive with this, and Rags was pedaling this. Maybe you didn't have the brake upgrades on it?
It didn't have the upgraded brakes.
No, but you were, because you were like, I'm just going to sit back on this because I cannot push this hard.
Yeah, I didn't want to push it, but I have since doing the brakes. I've taken it on a couple of track days, and it's hairy. You can't push the car as much as you'd like to compared to the Z4M or compared to the 1M. So
I think
that
that's
in itself tells
you. So what's quite interesting is that's the genesis of a lot of M cars now. Whilst this
is
with the end.
Yeah, but also there's a strong link with both these cars, right?
Yeah.
Both of these, if you love E30 M3s, if that's the zenith of what you love at M, these two cars are the closest you can ever get to one without actually getting one. This one, in terms of its ethos and its general kind of pugnacious vibe, it's short, it's wide, it's tall, it's got, the E30 M3 didn't have like a very low engine, but it's got that kind of energy to it. And then this, mechanically, is the closest you can get to E30 M3 without buying one. This is actually, you know what this is? Alpina did an E30 M3 with a big M30 straight six in it. Everyone goes crazy over that car, right? An E30 M3 with a big Alpina tuned 6-cylinder engine. Mechanically, I guarantee that car is so similar to this. This is an E30 kind of dimensioned car with big wide arches, an E30 M3 rear subframe which defines how that car drives, and a big iron block straight six slung up front. A bit more power, a bit more weight, is if you want a B6 or if you want the Alpine E30 M3, this is kind of your next best option, and it has its own character.
And you know what's interesting? In the States, the biggest sort of engine transplant within the E30 M3 is the S50 and the S54.
Yeah.
They go absolutely mad for it in the States, and I think it's probably just, again, it's following that.
Aren't you building a?
Yeah, we're building one. Yeah, we're building one.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Be interested to see
Shout
that.
out to Ultimate Velocity.
That should be coming out hopefully at the end of this year, our build. I think that takes us into a nice segue into completing this video, which is that both of these cars should be hugely celebrated for what they stand for. The most celebrated M car, in my opinion, is the E30 M3. That's the one that started off where we are right now. And like you said, mechanically this is very similar, but from a spiritual successor, that is it.
Yeah.
And they are Skunkworks BMWs, and that's what's so amazing about BMW is that they have an organisation in M which still produce cars like this and that. The sad thing is that they don't really have that anymore. I mean, they made the XM or something like that.
Well, they still make the M2. They still make it manual. And it's not quite the same.
But these are almost cars that they tried to make them today. They'd be financially unviable because there's not going to be the appetite to make 450 of these for the UK or 821 of these for the UK market as well.
But they should be celebrated. And I think Skunkworks BMW have done phenomenal things with these two. And it's such a privilege to have them in the club and have them as a part of our community as well. And yeah, I think that it's a celebration of BMW M, really. Both these cars, and actually they should be heralded. And that really should have been called the M1, in my opinion.
Should have been, yeah.